This happened about a month ago. I'm not exactly a seasoned journalist, but I've written a few pieces before. My recent scandal put a damper on that. I came back to Willow Creek hoping to find a compelling story that could revive my career. I thought it would just be the same small town I grew up in, with the old buildings and the friendly faces. But things felt off. I could sense the weight of something heavy hanging in the air. It's something I've never stopped thinking about. I parked my car by the edge of the town square. The coffee shop was still there, its sign swinging gently in the afternoon breeze. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The aroma of burnt coffee filled my nose. Old friends sat in the corner, whispering. They looked at me, then turned away. I felt a chill. I grabbed a cup of coffee and left quickly. I wandered down Main Street. I passed the town library. It looked just like I remembered. The librarian, Mrs. Keller, recognized me. She smiled, but her eyes were hollow. I asked her about the strange occurrences in town. She hesitated. "Things have changed, Ethan," she said. I pressed her for details, but she shook her head. "You should leave things alone." Ignoring her, I walked to the old Miller house. It was famous for the terrible event from 8 years ago when a father traded his son for wealth. I'd heard the gossip in town, but I wanted to know more. I stepped over the broken fence. The yard was overgrown. The house stood dark and silent. I felt uneasy but curious. As I approached the door, I heard a low whisper. It sounded like a child. I froze. "Help me," it said. My heart raced. I knocked on the door, but it didn't budge. I peered through a crack in the boarded-up windows. Inside, shadows danced. I saw a dusty old chair and a broken mirror. No sign of a child. I stepped back, shaking my head. Maybe I imagined it. Then I saw strange symbols on the trees. They were carved deep like a warning. I took pictures, my hands shaking. I felt someone's eyes on me. Turning around, I saw a man standing at the edge of the yard. He looked familiar. I squinted. It was Tom, the boy's father. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was low but steady. I felt a knot in my stomach. My instincts told me to run. "I'm just looking into the past," I replied. He looked at me strangely. "You shouldn't poke around." His eyes were wild. I felt cold all over. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the trees. I wanted to follow him, but a new fear seized me. What was he hiding? I took a step back. Suddenly, the whispers returned. "Help me." I jerked my head around, but there was no one there. The trees were silent again. Then a shadow passed behind me. I turned quick. There was nothing there, just trees swaying, but the air felt heavy again. My pulse raced. I knew I had to leave. This town had secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. The next day, I decided to go back to the library. I needed more information about the Miller house and the dark events surrounding it. Mrs. Keller wasn't the only one who might have answers. I stepped inside, trying to shake off the unease from yesterday. The library was quiet, almost too quiet. The sun poured in through the windows, lighting up dust motes that floated lazily in the air. I walked past the shelves, looking for anything related to the Miller family. My heart sank as I read the titles. Most of the books were about the town's history, but they glossed over the Miller incident. I approached Mrs. Keller's desk again. "I need to know what happened," I said, my voice firm but shaky. "Can't you tell me anything?" She looked at me, her expression tight. "Ethan, some things are best left alone. You have no idea the pain that's tied to that family." I nodded, biting back my frustration. "But I heard a voice last night, a child's voice. Someone needs help." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I thought I saw fear. "You did not hear that here," she whispered, glancing around. "You must go." I felt a surge of determination. Why does everyone keep telling me to leave it alone? I have to find out what really happened. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed loudly, cutting our conversation short. I stepped back. deciding it was best to leave before I pushed too hard. As I walked outside, I noticed the cafe across the street was busier than usual. Curiosity piqued. I headed over. When I walked in, I spotted a group gathered around a table, voice rising in intensity. I slipped into a seat at the counter, trying to catch snippets of their conversation. It was all about the Miller family. The whispers were about sightings and strange happenings. People claimed to see the boy wandering the woods at night. And then the lights flickered every night at 11, one young woman said, her eyes wide. What if he's still out there? Chills ran down my spine. I couldn't ignore this. I needed to know more. I asked the barista about the group, hoping for a lead. She shrugged, saying they were just a bunch of locals telling ghost stories. But as I turned to leave, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Tom, sitting at the back, staring into his coffee. I approached him. "Tom," I said softly, "can I sit with you?" He looked up, his face pale. "Why are you here?" "I want to understand. Can you tell me what really happened?" He hesitated, glancing towards the door as if expecting someone. "You shouldn't be asking questions. Some things are better left buried," he said, a tremor in his voice. Before I could respond, a loud crash outside made us all jump. When I turned, I saw that the wind had knocked over a sign from an empty storefront. But it was more than that. Tom's expression shifted, turning to panic. "We need to go, now." That's when I noticed the air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name. As I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, I realized Tom was already moving, backing away from me. The urgency on his face made my heart race. "Tom, what's going on?" But he was gone, slipping out the door like a wisp of smoke. I was left with a feeling of dread, and suddenly I knew I was deeper into this mystery than I had bargained for. I stood alone in the cafe, my thoughts racing. The air was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and unanswered questions. I scanned the room, looking for Tom, but he was gone. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air, leaving me bewildered and anxious. The barista was busy cleaning the counter, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. I could feel the weight of the stories I had just heard pressing down on me. The mention of a boy wandering the woods at night echoed in my mind. What if it was true? What if he needed help? I pushed myself to stand, determined to find Tom and figure out what was happening. As I stepped outside, I was met with the brisk air. The cafe felt like a different world now. The road stretched ahead, quiet but charged with anticipation. I spotted Tom in the distance, hurrying down the street. "Wait!" I called. He was walking fast, almost as if he was trying to outrun something. I broke into a jog to catch up with him. "Tom, please, just talk to me," I said when I finally reached him. He stopped and turned, panic flickering in his eyes again. "Ethan, you need to stop digging. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Then tell me," I pressed. "Why is everyone so scared? What happened to the Miller family?" He was silent for a moment, and I could see the conflict on his face. "I can't. You'll regret it," he finally said, shaking his head. Just then, the wind picked up again, swirling leaves around us. I shivered, feeling a chill that seemed to reach into my bones. "I heard a voice last night, Tom. A child's voice. I can't just ignore that." Tom looked at me, finally seeming to notice the desperation in my voice. "You heard it too?" he whispered, glancing around as though the walls might have ears. "We need to go to the woods. That's where everything happened." A cold knot formed in my stomach at the thought. The woods were known for their darkness and secrets, but the urge to know overwhelmed my fear. "Let's go then," I said, my determination stronger than the dread gnawing at me. The path to the woods was overgrown, shadows creeping ominously as the sun dipped lower. "Just remember," Tom said quietly as we walked, "many of the stories about the Millers aren't just tales, they're warnings." "It can't be worse than not knowing," I replied, though doubt crept in. As we reached the edge of the trees, I glimpsed a faded sign warning trespassers, keep out. My palms were sweaty. What do we do when we find him? I asked, the gravity of our situation settling in. But before Tom could respond, a piercing scream rang through the trees. It was a child's voice, shrill and filled with terror. My heart dropped, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. That's it, Tom said, his face pale. We have to go back. No, I shouted, the urgency overwhelming my fear. We can't leave someone in pain. I took a step toward the woods, barely aware of Tom's frantic attempts to stop me. Ethan, he yelled, but it was too late. I pushed through the branches, the darkness swallowing me whole as I followed the sound. Then everything went dark. I stumbled through the thick underbrush, branches snagging at my clothes. The air was thick with dampness, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The scream echoed again, this time more distant, but it fueled my adrenaline. I had to find the source. Tom! I called, but instead of an answer, silence surrounded me. The shadows deepened, each step feeling heavier as the trees loomed overhead like twisted giants. I hesitated, the urge to turn back clashing with the desperate need to help. Then, out of the darkness, a flicker caught my eye. A faint glow shimmered between the trees. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. What was it? The scream echoed again, clearer now, and I forced myself to push through the last of the branches. I emerged into a small clearing. In the center stood an old, rotting cabin. The glow seemed to be coming from within, casting long, eerie shadows against the trees. I took a cautious step forward, glancing around for Tom. Perhaps he had followed me after all. The woods felt oppressive, every rustle sending my nerves into overdrive. Ethan! I heard Tom's voice call from behind. Relief washed over me, but it quickly turned to dread as I turned to face him. His expression was pale, eyes wide with fear. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice trembling. I have to see what's inside, I insisted, taking another step toward the cabin. What if the boy is in there? Or what if something else is? He countered, sounding desperate. This place has a history, Ethan. The Millers isn't all people talk about. The woods, they take things. I almost faltered. Does he mean the child? I looked back at the cabin. The glow flickered again, almost like it was beckoning me. I need to go in, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. If we can help him. Ethan, please! Tom grabbed my arm, pulling me back. We don't know what's inside. People have gone in and never come out. His words made the air feel thicker. I wrestled with my fear, but the thought of leaving a child in pain was unbearable. I can't just walk away, I said firmly, brushing off his grip. Stay here if you want, but I'm going. With that, I turned back toward the cabin. I took a deep breath and stepped towards the door, which hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously. The scent of damp wood mixed with something else, something sour and wrong. As I pushed the door open, it groaned like a beast disturbed from slumber. Inside was dim but illuminated by a strange, flickering light that cast shadows dancing on the walls. There was a chill that made every hair on my body stand on end. That's when I saw it. An old, tattered toy lying in the middle of the floor, a small wooden soldier painted and chipped. It felt wrong, out of place, as if the room itself had been waiting for me to find it. Before I could even think about what to do next, I heard another scream, closer this time. I froze. Fear gripped me and I knew I had to decide quickly. The boy, or whatever was causing the cries, was somewhere in this cursed cabin. But I was not prepared for what I was about to uncover. With my heart pounding, I took a cautious step deeper into the cabin. The flickering light illuminated the dusty wooden beams and revealed more of the room. The walls were lined with strange symbols, carved and scratched like desperate markings from a time long lost. I felt like I was intruding on something sacred, or something very wrong. The scream echoed once more, closer and more distinct. It was a child's voice, full of fear and sorrow. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to move forward. I had to find the boy. My senses were on high alert, pricking at the edges of my awareness. This place reeked of decay, but it was the pleading cry that kept drawing me in. "Tom!" I called out, but my voice felt like a fragile thing, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. I strained to hear any response, but the only sound was the frantic beating of my own heart. I stepped further into the room, avoiding the debris on the floor. By the window, I noticed a shadow shifting just beyond the curtains. My pulse quickened. I hesitated for a moment, but I had come too far. I had to know. I approached the window and slowly pulled aside the tattered curtain. The outside world was cloaked in darkness, but then I caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow darted away, disappearing behind a tree. Was that Tom? No, the figure was too small, too quick. My stomach twisted as dread settled in. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping outside the cabin, my voice cracking through the night. I scanned the darkness, but nothing stirred. Just the trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me further away from the cabin, deeper into the woods. Suddenly I stumbled. I fell to my knees, catching myself just in time. As I looked down, I found the wooden soldier lying on the ground beside me, dirtied and grimy. I froze. It was the same toy, the same unmistakable paint job from the cabin. How did it get here? Before I could piece together the horror looming over me, I heard it again. The scream. It was no longer distant. It was right in front of me. Panic ignited in my chest. I scrambled to my feet, following the sound, but my surroundings shifted, the trees closing in, disorienting me. "Ethan!" I heard Tom's urgent whisper cutting through the silence. I turned back, heart racing at the fear in his eyes as he emerged from the shadows. "We need to leave now." "No," I said, shaking my head vigorously. "I need to find him." "Ethan, please, the woods are playing tricks on us. We have to go." His voice broke in desperation. But before I could respond, I noticed something. A flash of light further down the path. It blinked rapidly, almost like a beacon. I felt a pull toward it, as if it knew I was coming. My instincts screamed for me to run, but another scream pierced the air, forcing me to steel myself. I took a step toward the light, Tom's panicked voice fading behind me, swallowed by the woods. Something was waiting for me. I could feel it, but whether it was salvation or doom remained to be seen. As I drew closer, the air thickened again, charged with something raw and unnatural. I realized then that I wasn't just looking for the boy. I was crossing into territory where no one returned untouched. And whatever lurked ahead was no longer of this world. The flickering light grew brighter as I moved closer. It burst through the trees like a spotlight, illuminating a clearing ahead. Relief washed over me, but dread clung to my bones. I could feel something was waiting there, something I couldn't see yet. When I cleared the last of the branches, I found myself standing in front of an old well, its stones covered in strange markings similar to those in the cabin. The light was coming from within, dancing shadows flickering across the ground. I hesitated, my heart pounding again. "Tom!" I shouted, realizing he was still back in the woods somewhere. "Can you hear me?" I received no reply. The silence felt heavy, thickening my panic. The urge to turn and run surged through me, but the scream echoed again, sharper, more terrified. It felt impossibly close, cutting through the night air. I edged toward the well, drawing in a sharp breath. "Please, Tom," I whispered. "Just a little more." The beam of light pulsated as if it were alive, urging me to come closer. As I leaned over the edge of the well, I peered down into the pitch black. The stone walls seemed to extend endlessly, and the light flickered like a dying star. My gut twisted. Memories swirled in my mind. The old tales of sacrifices made to appease gods or spirits. That's what this felt like an offering or a trap. Then I saw it. A face emerged from the darkness, pale and gaunt, eyes wide with terror. "Help me!" it cried. But the voice was wrong. It was distorted, echoing as though it had traveled through layers of gloom. My chest tightened as recognition hit. "Tom?" I gasped, heart sinking as his image flickered in and out. Then, just like that, the face vanished back into darkness. And instead the well's interior was filled with shadows moving, twisting in ways they shouldn't. Panic surged, and I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. That's when I noticed it, a hand, small and outstretched, reaching up from the darkness of the well. My heart raced. I took a step closer, torn between hope and horror. I reached out, grasping for anything that could help. "I'm here," I shouted. "I'll get you out." But just as my fingers brushed against the edges of the well, the ground beneath me shifted, rocks and dirt crumbled, swallowing my resolve. I stumbled back, disoriented. And in that moment of chaos, I felt a cold breath on my neck, and the light dimmed to a mere flicker. I turned quickly, and it was there. A figure emerged from the shadows, not human, with hollow eyes and a twisted face. It raised a hand toward me, and in that instant, fear launched me backward. I was stumbling away from the well, away from anything familiar. "Run!" I shouted, finding my feet beneath me as I sprinted into the trees, the darkness swallowing me once more. But as I ran, I could hear the unmistakable sound of children's laughter echoing through the branches, mingling with the distant screams. Just then, I felt a cold grip around my ankle. I looked down, heart racing, and saw nothing but the darkness coiling around me. I barely had time to think before I was yanked backward violently, plunging down into the shadows. The last thing I heard was the wind whipping through the trees, and then everything went black. I came to with a jolt, gasping for air. The darkness had a weight to it, smothering me. Instinct kicked in, and I scrambled to my feet, breathless and disoriented. My heart still hammered in my chest, but I was alone. The chilling laughter had faded, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. I blinked against the darkness, trying to get my bearings. There was no sign of the well or the twisted figure, just trees that loomed like ancient giants. With every step, the twigs snapped beneath my feet, the sound echoing in the stillness. "Tom!" I shouted again, my voice barely a whisper. There was no response, only silence pressing against my ears. I took a few cautious steps, scanning the area. The shapes of the trees began to twist around me, making everything feel unfamiliar. Part of me wanted to scream and flee, but I forced myself to breathe through the panic. There had to be a way out. Then I noticed something glimmering on the ground. It caught the faint moonlight filtering through the leaves. I moved closer, and in the damp earth lay a bracelet, Tom's bracelet, the one he always wore, a woven thing with small beads. My stomach sank. I turned it over in my hand, the cold metal biting into my palm. Did he drop it while trying to escape? Or was it a sign that he was close? I couldn't think about that now. I had to find him. Moving forward, I tried to quiet the chaos in my mind. I had to focus. The laughter echoed again, faint but persistent, weaving through the branches. It curled around my thoughts, drawing me deeper into the forest. I hated that it beckoned to me like a twisted child's call. I followed the sound, adrenaline pushing me forward. The deeper I went, the more the light changed. It was dimmer now, a dull glow that barely illuminated my surroundings. Each rustle of leaves felt like a warning. Then I stumbled upon something bizarre. An altar made of stones, eerily similar to the ones around the well. It was surrounded by wilted flowers, their colors faded and lifeless. I felt something creep up my spine, the hairs standing on end. In the center of the altar was a small wooden figure. It looked like a child, carved unsteadily with exaggerated features, twisted limbs and a huge grin. My gut twisted. It sent chills through me, and I dropped Tom's bracelet as if it had burned me. As I stood there, frozen, I felt a draft, a shift in the air. The shadows thickened, swirling around me, almost alive. Then, I heard it again. A child's laughter, now mocking, echoing from somewhere above me. It came not from the trees, but from the sky, as if it was coming from a distance just out of reach. I stepped back slowly but tripped over a root. That's when I saw the eyes, a pair of glowing, hungry orbs watching from the shadows. I knew I had to move. I turned to run, but before I took a step, something landed heavily on the ground behind me with a deep thud. My heart raced. Whatever was out there knew I was here now. I had to escape before I became part of whatever dark game was being played in this twisted forest. I bolted, my instincts screaming for me to get away from whatever was lurking in those shadows. Branches whipped at my face as I pushed through the underbrush, each breath sharper than the last. I needed to escape, to find Tom, but a chill danced down my spine. I could feel the presence behind me stalking, waiting for the right moment to strike. As I ran, thoughts of the altar flashed through my mind. Who had built it? Why was Tom's bracelet there? I couldn't shake the feeling that the two were connected. It was as if the forest itself was alive, pulling me deeper into its cruel grasp. My foot caught on something, and I went down hard, sending a jolt through my body. The forest floor was damp and slick, and I barely caught myself with my hands. I scrambled back to my feet and glanced behind me, breathless. Nothing moved in the darkness but the shadows. I pressed onward, driven by fear and the desperate hope that I'd find Tom. I didn't even know where I was going, but something felt almost magnetic about the deeper parts of the forest. I could feel the pulse of the trees, like a heartbeat echoing in a haunted choir. Then, through the twisted branches, I saw flickering lights, fireflies. No, they were too steady. They glowed like will-o'-the-wisps, beckoning me to follow. I hesitated, knowing that it might be a trap, but I couldn't ignore the possibility of finding Tom. As I approached the lights, the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. I stepped into a clearing and the sight hit me like a punch. There were more stone altars, each one adorned with the same wilted flowers. The ground was littered with broken toys, dolls with missing eyes, toy cars tattered and rusted. My heart sank. In the center of the clearing stood a larger wooden figure, a grotesque version of the child statue I had seen. This one had a cracked smile, its distorted features somehow more chilling in the dim light. I shuddered, realizing that it seemed to be watching me. Then I noticed movement at the edge of the clearing, a faint flicker of something human. Then, gone. Was that Tom? I took a tentative step forward, but the ground shifted under my feet, and I stumbled into the altar. That's when I heard the laughter again. This time it wasn't just mocking, it was laced with something dark, hunger. The lights around the clearing flickered out, plunging me back into an oppressive darkness. Panic surged through me and I spun around, searching for an escape. Suddenly I felt a tug at my leg. I looked down, but there was nothing there. Just the shadows creeping toward me. I had to get out. Mustering every ounce of strength, I turned and ran, ignoring the pain in my legs and the terror rising in my chest. But as I fled, I sensed that whatever was watching me had picked up speed. The laughter grew louder, chaotic and relentless, pulling me back toward the altars. I was not just running for my life. I was being hunted. Then I heard a voice. Barely a whisper, but it cut through the dark like a knife. "Help me," it pleaded. My breath caught. It was Tom's voice. I stopped dead in my tracks, torn between the terror closing in and the desperate hope that my brother was alive. "Tom!" I shouted, though the sound felt fragile against the consuming darkness. I had a choice to make, keep running or face whatever lay ahead in search of him. The weight of that decision pressed heavily on my chest, and I knew I had to act fast. I hesitated for a moment, the darkness pressing in on all sides. I could hear the laughter still echoing, a twisted soundtrack to the chaotic feeling in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I called out again. "Tom, where are you?" The response came, softer this time. "Over here." It tugged at me, a lifeline in the midst of all this dread. I dashed toward the sound, afraid to lose it, needling through the underbrush. The laughter pulsated around me, fading in and out, but Tom's voice grew clearer. "Help me!" I ducked under a low branch and stumbled into another clearing, larger than the last. The moonlight spilled like a pale waterfall across the ground. A strange energy hummed in the air, prickling my skin. Before me stood a massive oak tree, its ancient bark twisted with age. At its roots lay a dark opening, one I hadn't noticed before. "Tom?" I whispered, unease creeping back in. The tug of fear twisted deeper as I peered into the shadows of the gaping hole. "Are you in there?" Silence stretched out and my heart raced, but I couldn't turn away. I moved closer, activating a strange sense of courage surging through me. If there was even a chance that Tom was here, I had to risk it. The rustling of movement made me jump, then cautiously I stepped closer to the tree. That's when I spotted a frayed edge poking out from behind the roots. I knelt down and reached for it, my fingers grazing the fabric of what looked like a torn shirt, Tom's shirt. "Tom!" I called again. My voice echoed back, but I pressed on, tugging at the shirt. It came free with a sudden jerk, revealing a small, dark object lodged within the roots. My breath caught as I pulled it into the moonlight. It was an old, rusted key, intricately designed and cold to the touch. A chill ran through me. What did it unlock? Before I could think further, a growl resonated from behind me. The ground trembled faintly beneath my feet. The shadows around me writhed like angry snakes, and the laughter returned, louder and more furious. Fear clawed at me, but I couldn't afford to be paralyzed this time. I had to move, to find Tom and escape whatever was hunting me. I shoved the key into my pocket, adrenaline pushing me as I turned to run, but not before I caught a glimpse of something lurking in the darkness, eyes gleaming, watching. I sprinted away from the tree, but as I did, the laughter morphed into a symphony of shrieks and whispers. They were echoing not just from the shadows, but within my mind, warning me that I was not alone. Then, just as I broke past the edge of the clearing, I heard a shriek that didn't belong to the forest. It was human, full of pain and desperation. "Help me!" My pulse raced as I recognized that voice. It was Tom. Fear crackled in my bones, but I steeled my resolve. I wasn't done yet. I had to find him before it was too late. But as I turned back toward the sound, the forest closed in around me and the branches seemed to stretch out, grabbing at me. I had to decide. Follow the voice further into danger or find my way back to the key. Time was running out and the shadows were closing in fast. I stumbled through the forest, each step made heavier by the shadows lurking at the corners of my vision. The echoes of Tom's voice lingered in the air, calling for help, and my heart pounded with every frantic beat. I turned towards the sound again, instinct pushing me forward. "Tom!" I shouted. "I'm coming!" The forest warped around me, branches like clawed hands reaching out, scratching at my arms and pulling me back. I took a deep breath, fighting against the thick fog of fear closing in. "Where are you?" I pressed on, moving deeper into the darkness. The cries grew louder, wrapping around me like a noose. Then, just as I felt the panic begin to subside, a deep rumble resonated close by. Something stirred in the shadows, eyes glinting back at me. I froze, spine tingling. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but the voice was stronger. "Help me!" rang out louder than before. I pushed my way through the underbrush, finding myself in yet another clearing that felt surreal, cloaked in a heavy gloom. The tree at its center loomed like a sentinel from a nightmare, its gnarled branches twisted into cruel limbs. Beneath its roots, I noticed a faint glimmer pulling me closer. At its base, something caught my eye. Half buried was another wooden soldier. This one looked more weathered than the last and was missing its head. I knelt down, my fingers brushing against it, and at that moment the laughter returned, louder and more mocking than before. A cold wind swept through the clearing, sending an icy shudder down my spine. "Tom," I yelled again, but desperation bloomed within me as I sensed the darkness surrounding me was alive, pulsating with a hungry energy. My thoughts raced. Why had I come here? What was this place? But the pull of Tom's voice overcame my doubts. "Ethan!" His voice was closer now. He was here somewhere. I was almost there. Just beyond the tree I saw movement, a blur darting between the shadows. I surged forward, heart hammering, but my path was suddenly obstructed. A root snagged my foot and I tumbled to the ground. The light from the moon illuminated a spiral staircase carved into the earth next to the tree roots, its dark depths inviting me like a sin. I felt the allure of whatever lay below, a pull that was too strong to resist. I glanced back, reminding myself why I had come. Not only was I searching for Tom, but there was a darkness rising behind me. It felt impossibly close, too real to dismiss. This was a choice between facing it or risking losing Tom forever. I gritted my teeth, determination surging through my veins. I scrambled to my feet, propelled by the thought of my brother. If Tom needed help, I had to act quickly. As I drew closer, I could hear breathing, low and rasping. The air grew thick and stale, and then the whispers returned, disembodied voices that wrapped around me like a shroud, pulling me downwards. I stepped onto the first stair, feeling the cold concrete beneath my feet, then the second, adrenaline coursing through me. "Tom!" I called again, the darkness swallowing my voice as I descended into the gloom. With each step, shadows flitted across the walls, teasing me with flickers of movement. Was it my imagination, or were they watching, waiting? Further down, I reached a small enclave, and a faint glow emanated from within. My heart raced as I peeked inside. There he was. Tom lay on the floor, eyes closed, shivering. Relief washed over me until I noticed the twisted figure hovering above him, a shadow born from nightmares, body limp yet menacing. Its gaze fixed on me, hunger emanating from its very being. The laughter erupted, ringing in my ears, drowning out my thoughts, but one thing surged to the forefront. My brother needed me. I rushed into the light, grabbing Tom's shoulders, shaking him. "Wake up, Tom." His eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his features. "Ethan," he murmured, barely audible. "Help me." I turned to the figure, its hollow eyes silent and sinister, and I felt rage bubbling within me, fueled by fear for my brother. "Get away from him." The creature lunged forward, darker than the shadows, and I raised my arm instinctively, brandishing the wooden soldier as if it were a shield. In that moment, the glow around me intensified, casting shadows against the walls that danced in a frenzied manner. But before I could comprehend what was happening, the soldier began to vibrate in my hand, glowing with an unexpected warmth. Suddenly the creature's movement snapped to a halt, a howl emanating from it, echoing through the stone chamber. The walls trembled, and I felt an explosion of energy pulse through the space around us. Rather than fleeing, I stepped forward, holding the soldier firmly, and shouted, "You cannot have him." The twisted figure recoiled, but the laughter shifted to a desolate wail. And for a brief moment, I could see that the walls of the chamber shimmered, light bending around us, pulsating with an ancient power. I pulled Tom up to his feet, his body cold and limp beneath my grip, and together we stepped back toward the staircase. The creature's howl turned frantic, ceaseless as we retreated, its fury echoing in the air. "Run!" I yelled, and we stumbled toward the spiral staircase, clutching the soldier as if it were a lifeline. We scrambled up, light guiding us as we raced back into the clearing, pushing through the underbrush. The laughter faded behind us, replaced with a hollow silence that washed over the trees. I could feel the shadows retreating, the presence dissipating slowly. When we finally burst into the moonlight, I collapsed, breathing hard and trembling. Tom collapsed beside me, staring back into the woods, confusion etched on his face. I looked at him then, questions swirling in my mind, but more important was this moment of escape, of being together again. "Did it follow?" Tom whispered, trembling slightly. "I don't know," I replied, my gaze fixed on the tree. The shadows seemed to linger just beyond the borders of the light. "But we need to get out of here." As we pushed ourselves to our feet, I felt the weight of uncertainty and unanswered questions resting heavily upon us. I couldn't shake off the feeling that the woods would always have a grip on this town, that something was left behind. But one thing was clear. The horrors we escaped didn't belong to the living. There was a darkness rooted in history, entangled in secrets. I looked at Tom, relief intermingled with dread. There were still more stories buried deep in the shadows. And as we stumbled through the underbrush, the forest behind us fell silent once more. But I couldn't help but wonder what awaited the next person who dared to seek the truth. Would they fall into the same endless darkness, or would someone stop it once and for all? The questions hung in the air as we walked away, each step echoing softly in the stillness of Willow Creek.